Round 9 of the AFL season might not have been maybe the most exciting in terms of top to bottom games that were just absolutely barn burners. We have a few of them though, and there were definitely some really good matchups in this. But I think this was one of the most interesting weeks, and Don, you kind of share the same sentiment too, is because the results that we saw this week were shocking and staggering, and I hate to say I told you so, but when it comes to the Roos finally getting off the schneid, I kind of told you so. You should I could not get a single pick right the rest of the season, but as long as I have the Roos first win in my back pocket, I am more than happy with that. But we did have a couple teams making huge statements, and we might have a team that's breaking out and building to a solid future. And also, apparently Marvel Stadium is trash, and I just didn't know it. So, we'll get into all of that and more, because of course this is fourth along the American home for Australian football. I'm your host Ross Allen, joined alongside by AFL correspondent Coach Donnie Hassan. Coach, how are we feeling after this round of footy?
Oh man, this round of footy again proves that nothing, when you think you know, you have absolutely no idea. I will give it to you, Ross. You did call it. And unfortunately, Hawthorn is becoming a team that is very well known for being able to let the worst team in the league get a win over them. Because this is 3 straight years. I saw this fact pop up on a couple of the shows that I
Mm-hmm.
watched over the weekend. This is the third straight year,
Yeah,
third straight season
it's
that Hawthorn has lost to a team at the bottom of the ladder with no wins. They North Melbourne this year, Adelaide the year before, and I'd have to go, I can't remember specifically, but I think 3 years consecutively that they have lost to the Wooden Spooners. So unfortunately, Alistair Clarkson is now being more synonymous with dropping games than he is winning, unfortunately.
not the best thing to be recognized with. And you give me credit there. I'll have to give you some credit too, Donnie, because you did beat me in our fantasy football matchup this round. But it's okay. I'm trying my best. I put in the best players, and it's just not getting done the last few weeks. But is what it is. I am way better at American fantasy football. But when we get into round 9 itself, before we get into the first game between St. Kilda and Geelong, and then after this coverage, of course, we're going to be giving you Donnie's team of the round, our power rankings that have a little bit of a shake-up now. Two new teams emerging into our 5 spots, respectively. Then, of course, we're going to give you our round 10 tips. But the first thing I think we need to talk about, Donnie, is a little bit of controversy when it comes to the whole holding the ball kind of deal going on this year.
Oh man, doesn't the same trend tend to pop up? Exactly 1 year ago, Alistair Clarkson, after a game that basically was very, very similar, where a ton of tackles were not rewarded with holding the ball calls, came out and I think threw a lot of last year into an absolute frenzy when it came to this rule. And Brett Ratton from the St. Kilda Saints, after their game against Geelong, kind of did the same thing. He kind of
Mm-hmm.
came out, said, "Well, we laid 85, which was actually 87, so he was statistically a little bit off. But let's not give a very not happy coach. Well, let's give him a little bit of leeway here.
Right,
He
right,
was only given 3 free kicks on 87 tackles.
right. Mm.
That again, do I think every single tackle that's ever laid in the existence of Aussie rules football should be holding the ball? No. Okay. When you watch the replays, and I've seen some of the footage that kind of shows his argument a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I do understand there's a lot of incorrect disposals. There's a lot of times that Geelong players are tackled and the ball is just dropped.
Yeah.
Many of them, if you really look at it, the referee is in a bad position to be able to see it. He's in field, and the person with the footy is basically facing the boundary line. So there's no way he can see it.
No.
So the camera can see it, but he can't. So for him, he thinks maybe it's come out in the tackle, so that's why he's not blowing, calling, holding the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give the umpires a little bit of leeway. But again, I've stated it in a few episodes, and I almost feel like a broken record. The complaining about refereeing is not going to change anything.
No.
Okay. Do I
Never has.
believe Well, and I don't think it's. I think it's the same way in all sport. I think
Yeah.
that's the one thing as sporting fans. I said it's the one excuse or argument that really annoys me is when you blame the referees for a loss. When if you actually go in and watch the game, 95% of the time, the referee is not going to completely cost you
Hmm.
the game. It may seem like it, but it probably is not. Like I said, do I think the AFL is going to tweak it again? Knowing me, because they're the little puppet master, they will. They'll go to the referees. They'll be, and they actually kind of did. By the time you got to the Melbourne game against Carlton, the numbers had totally flipped. There was like three times as many tackles calling for holding the balls. By the time you got to the Melbourne for Carlton game,
Hmm.
later on in the round, so I think it's being addressed. But Ratton took a little bit of a risk there because sometimes the AFL is not real big on you bashing the umpiring. The
Really?
re
I've never noticed that.
I know. So yeah, it's like the NFL coaches when they bash the NFL referees is that sometimes it happens. Do I think they should be allowed to be able to air grievances? I understand. So I'm hoping that maybe that they kind of simplify it. I know Luke Beveridge, the coach of the Western Bulldogs, came out and said,
Hmm.
maybe if you just simplify the wording of this, just simplify what you define it as, and I think it'll change. I understand the AFL is trying to open up the game to get more scoring because of the congestion and everything like that. But this is not something that's just going to go away magically.
No.
This is going to take a while to kind of adjudicate. So we'll cross our fingers that maybe it gets changed a little bit this week. It's not going to be fixed. I don't again, the subjectivity in the gray area in umpiring in the AFL
Hmm.
is way too hard to be able to get it perfect
Yeah.
unless you're going to have referees watching the TV camera and blowing a virtual whistle and being able to do it that way, which
Oh,
is just going to be super weird. So,
yeah.
so we'll take it like that.
Well, with that being said, let's get on to the first game of the round, which was St. Kilda and Geelong, and this was a game that Geelong seemingly gets lucky to escape with a win because doesn't matter how many times you get the ball inside the 50 if you can't. But I mean, and Donnie, I asked a question after this game. Just to clarify once again on there, the way to score in the goal of the game is to put the ball through the middle uprights. Is that correct?
It that's kind of the point
Kind of
of
the
the
point,
game,
right? Right.
unfortunately.
So why St. Kilda? Shout out to you guys. You kick. You get your 5 goals, but you get 17 behinds on this one. In the game, you only lose by 21, which is a relatively close kind of margin, especially considering how many damn behinds you guys kicked. This was a really slow way to start the season off. Normally, these Friday night games have been hitting every single round. This is the first one that kind of just crept the bed in a way, but St. Kilda, they continue to struggle. Geelong, like I said, they get away with one here. It was weird. It was weird watching Geelong because St. Kilda, I mean, obviously their offense didn't show, but their defense showed up and showed out in through the most part of this game. Dominated tackles, they dominated hitouts, and they limited the scoring and they limited the mobility of this Cats offense that seemingly has been starting to pick up steam. Like when we saw them against Richmond, they were breaking through those defensive lines, and it looks like St. Kilda was able to limit that for the most part here. But I gotta ask is why wasn't Geelong really able to get things going? Was it something that the Saints were doing specifically? And what the hell was going on with St. Kilda's kicking?
Well, the easiest way to say it is I think Geelong got pressured into making more mistakes, and the tackle pressure was absolutely insane in this game. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
St. Kilda was absolutely up in Geelong's, you know what, pretty right off the bat. I mean, from the opening bounce, probably almost to halftime. I mean, this was really a game that was dominated by St. Kilda when it came to pressure, when it came to most of the statistics.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is that St. Kilda couldn't kick straight worth a darn. I mean, the first quarter, 0-7, not a single goal in the entire quarter. 7 shots on goal. Geelong had three, but Geelong kicked 2 goals.
Mm-hmm.
That really killed St. Kilda's momentum in the first quarter. It was purely because if Max King could kick straight, he'd have had 4 goals in the first quarter, and we're talking
Right.
completely different game. But Max King goes 1-5 for the entire game, and now there's tons of people asking, does he have confidence issues? He's does he need to get a goal kicking coach? There's just a ton of question marks behind this really talented young forward that for some weird reason is just, I mean, his aimer is off. We don't know what.
At least he's
I
not
mean,
down 5 right now. We'll get to that Frio game a little later in the show. He saw
yeah,
some
let
competition.
goal kicking has not been a strong point for some of these players in the league this year.
Teams.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean, St. Kilda, this was a great effort.
Mm-hmm.
It literally, it's everything inside 50 is what killed them. I mean, their tackle pressure, their hit outs were great. Their defense did really, really well for a Geelong team that can score really well to hold them to 68 points.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good performance. You were let down on the offensive side of the ball when your big forward goes 1-5, that really can kill a team. And I think that's really the easiest way to say it is
Mm-hmm.
that I think Kilda kicks 2 or 3 more straight. This is a completely different ball game.
Yes, 100%. We'll see if St. Kilda can maybe keep this defensive effort going and find a way to pick up their offense. And we'll see if Geelong is able to shake off this weird kind of lackluster win and be able to really have a little more of a breakout next round. The next game we want to go into, Donnie, is a game where for you I was nervous for, and I'm sure you were really nervous, especially after this first quarter of play, because we go to Sydney and Collingwood, where Collingwood ends the first quarter up by 3 goals, and Sydney really just isn't doing anything with the footy. But then they proceed to start kicking goals, and Collingwood doesn't score a goal for the next 2 quarters. 2 quarters. They kept it through out of the middle, so that was fantastic way for Sydney to really pick things up after the slow start, and they are able to take down the struggling Magpies. They're able to kind of get back on track on their own in their own way here. I mean, especially with Isaac Heaney, he's putting in work in this round. 3 goals, 2 behinds, 22 disposals. Never, if you're ever able to put up a stat line like that, you had a very, very solid game. And I wouldn't say that this win saved Sydney's season, but it could definitely get them back on track to being more of one of the top contenders, kind of what we saw out of them in the first handful of rounds of this year.
This was definitely a game as a Swan supporter. That first quarter, man, I was sweating bullets. Like there was a ton of Swans fans that were sweating bullets. Jordan Ngoe comes out, kicks a couple of goals early. Just they were fumbly. They were missing their kicks. Handballs were going awry. Defensive breakdowns everywhere. I mean, to hold them to only 4-2 is actually quite almost a Herculean effort by the back six to be able to kind of keep Collingwood from just running over them early. And this was a Collingwood team. You definitely tell. I don't know what was said, but they really came out on fire. They
Mm-hmm.
came out getting after it. Will Hoskin Elliott had like 10 possessions early in this game, and he had only been averaging 9 per game the last 2 or 3 rounds. So he gets 10 in the first quarter, kind of goes kind of nuts. And then Coach Longmire gets a hold of him in the second quarter, and you could tell everything kind of changed. The Swans, they kind of got their structure back in, and they just absolutely smothered Collingwood. They started winning the hitouts. They get it in their D50, and then Collingwood just literally could not get it out. I mean, as you kind of stated it, after the first quarter, Collingwood didn't kick their next goal until halfway into the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
They had only 3 points combined between the second and third quarter. Three or no, 4 points. That's it. So it was pretty impressive performance by the Swans there in the second and third
Yes.
quarters to kind of get a lead, and then they kind of ran away with it late, getting the 30-point win. This is a big one. This is the trap game. I know, especially here in the US, one of the things we like to say is that game that you kind of look over a little bit with the trip out west to Optus Stadium to a Frio team that's really good at home.
Mm-hmm.
This is the trap game. This is the game where everybody tells you you're going to win this. There's no way you're going to lose this game. This Collingwood team is reeling. Yes, they won, but they won against a rather not good North Melbourne team. So this was a game you're expected to win. These are the games that terrify me because these are the games
Mm-hmm.
that I've seen teams take it lightly and then they get smoked.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a really good performance by a Swans team that I think are starting to kind of solidify themselves. And then, as I've seen with a few people, their next run gives them a very, very good opportunity to get potentially 4 wins in the next 4 games. They have Frio out in Frio, Carlton, St. Kilda, and Hawthorne, if I
Mm-hmm.
remember correctly, are their next 4 games. Let me double check just to be sure here. Yep. St. Kilda is their 3rd game. Their 4th game, yes, is Hawthorne.
Mm-hmm.
So that's their next 4. I mean, those next 4 games, if you really look at it by ladder position, they should win all 4. I agree with what one announcer said. You get through this stretch of 4 with 3-1 or 4-0, you solidify yourself in the top 8. You probably put at least 2 games between you and 8th place. You really are going into your bye week in round 14 really, really happy knowing you've got 8 rounds of footy and you already got a 2-game buffer for
Yep.
the finals. All you got to do is win 3 games and you're in the finals no matter what.
And the crazy
And
thing
it's
is,
not
I
an
see the rest of the season, Donnie, is 4 to 5 losses at most.
hmm And it's not an easy stretch when you come back. It's not an easy stretch when you come back from the bye because if I remember correctly,
You got
they
Port
do.
Adelaide, you got West
Yep.
Coast, you got the
hmm
Doggies, then you go and play the team, the Giants, that you already lost to a little earlier in the year.
And the scary part about it is by then, GWS could have DeBoer, they could have Phil Davis,
Toby
they'll
Green.
have Toby Green back, they could have Cornelio back. That'll be a really good game late in the year to potentially get GW. Who knows? But maybe GWS is fighting for a final spot at that time. So this is a 4 game stretch for Swan centric here. My
It's
apologies to
okay.
the fans here. Um, this is a 4 game set that the Swans really can put themselves in really good case for the finals if they can go on a little run. So this game right here against Collingwood was a massive win for them
Mm-hmm.
to kind of set up this next 4 games.
You gotta remember, a win against a bad team can still build confidence and still be beneficial for the rest of the season. Don't undermine, just because Collingwood is bad doesn't mean that this was a bad win for the Sydney Swans. But let's get to that next game, Donnie, because this is, of course, the most exciting game of the round. This was North Melbourne, and this was the Hawthorn Hawks. And the Roos finally get that one. They finally get the one in the win column, and they did it in comeback fashion nonetheless. This was a game that, I mean, from the about halfway through the first quarter, it looked like Hawthorn was just kind of going to run away with it. It's going to be a simple win. Hey, North Melbourne sucks. Hawthorn is not as bad, so yeah, they're just going to win that game. But then you get to the fourth, going to the fourth, it's pretty much tied up. And then North just kind of barely gets a little bit of a lead. They almost lose it with like the last minute or two to go. They hold on for that 6 point win. And they finally get it done this year. And I was super pumped to see this. And better yet, because David Noble, head coach of the Roos, gets his first AFL win on as a head coach on his birthday, nonetheless. Happy 54th birthday to that man. That's one hell of a birthday present, if I do say so. Um, Man, what I liked about this team is something I've been saying the last number of weeks, Donnie, is that, yeah, they're not good, but they're not playing like they know they're not good. Every single time they're going out on that field, they're putting in 100% effort. These guys will scratch and claw. They're probably not going to win, but they're not going to win without, or they're not going to go, they're going to go down swinging. And it's this that finally gets it done. It's this effort that finally gets him to that win. And what really helped him too is that if we look at the battle clearances and inside 50s, the inside 50s really helped the comeback. And also, I mean, dominating that free kick category probably is going to is going to be beneficial to you. What did you think about this game though? I was super pumped about it.
This is the game that, oh man, you went into it thinking, okay, is with the loss of Jaden Stevenson for North Melbourne, is Hawthorn going to run away with this, and this is going to be a North Melbourne team that's a guaranteed 4 points and a guaranteed percentage booster, and when you first started off, it looked like it.
Yeah.
I mean Hawthorn. blew the doors off in the first quarter, and then the second quarter kind of continued it, and then North Melbourne kind of caught their feet in the second half and started to just kind of chip away, and they just stayed with it. And you gotta give Coach Noble some credit. He kept his boys focused. They really got after this Hawthorn team that I think they were a little shell shocked that this North Melbourne team still had the ability to get after them as much as they did. And literally North Melbourne was the team that had more legs late in the game. It was North Melbourne that was continuing to push. Like, I think some of the old legs of Hawthorn got exposed a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
there's more questions now as does Alistair Lynch stay for his 1 year left on his contract, or does he potentially walk away and go find a potential Collingwood job? There's the potential with the way things are going that Carlton could come open at the year, especially if Alistair Clarkson wants to go somewhere. There's very few teams that aren't going to go, okay, come on in, coach. I mean, you hate saying it, but it's very true.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of those where you look at it, Hawthorn is not as good as we thought. Again, as I stated a lot last year, I think this team is kind of reaping what they've sown for the years before. They traded so many first round draft picks to get older experienced players to stay in that flag contention type
Mm-hmm.
of spot, and they're not there yet, and they're reaping it because they don't have that top 10 talent to come into their list and be able to make an impact. You've got a bunch of older and in between players that right now you got to look at it and go, do you move them this next off season to potentially get more draft picks to infuse this team with even more youth? And then if you're going to trade people, who are you going to move?
Mm-hmm.
Do you move a Tommy Mitchell, who's a Brownlow medalist, towards the back half of his career? You may not get a ton in return for it, but you're opening up a spot for a younger player. Or do you move a Jager O'Meara who's a little bit younger, has a few more years on him, but may not get as much but you may get more in
Mm-hmm.
return in the long run because of his youth and still so many years to play. So there's a lot of questions down in Hawthorne, and unfortunately the president is not helping much with him going on the news and
Oh,
saying that he thinks, in his opinion, that the next 2 years they're going to go to the draft, they're going to be stronger, and after 2 seasons they're going to be right back in the finals contention.
no. Man.
And if
No, that's really, really wishful thinking by him. You know, that's good. I love the optimism.
and I watched a section on Footy Classify where they basically showed most teams, if you're going to go to the draft, it's usually 6, 7, 8 years before you start contending for a flag at least. So
Mm-hmm.
it might be a little bit of wishful thinking with me, Jeff Kennett, unless they can maybe pull a blockbuster trade with maybe Tommy Mitchell going somewhere and getting a first round draft pick or two to potentially bolster that unfortunately aging roster that is not exactly infused with a ton of young talent.
Well, that would be huge, and they almost have to do this. We were kind of talking last season, that they're a bunch of old guys, a bunch of vets. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but that team isn't going to be winning a flag anytime soon. It's best, especially because if you have these tenured guys that have been with the team, as a fan, it sucks. As an organization, it sucks to let them go and to trade them away. I've had experiences with that being like for baseball, an Oakland Athletics fan. I swear, for like the first 10 years I was a fan, they just traded away every damn star that they had, and so it was heartbreaking. But at least they're good now. Hawthorne, you trade those guys away, you give at least a little bit of value, so you can go to the draft like you want to. It's going to hurt, but you got to rip the band-aid off if you really want to get back on track and really start to rebuild towards building a contending team. And Donnie, would you consider it a hot take if I told you that this won't be the Roos' only win this year?
Uh, it may be. Unfortunately,
Let's
I'm
take a
not
look.
sure.
We got a game against Adelaide last round of the season. We have a
Mhm.
game against Gold Coast. St. Kilda maybe? Essendon's a couple times maybe. All I'm saying, is that out of one of these games, North Melbourne is going to win one more game this round or this season.
If they continue to
One more.
progress under David Noble the way they're progressing, I think there's a definite possibility, especially late in the year, you
Mm-hmm.
may catch you may catch a top eight team that maybe kind of takes them for granted a little bit and they surprise them. So I think it's possible. I'm not gonna jump into that one head first, shall we say. I'm gonna lay back a little bit because there's still both of these teams still have a lot still to work on. But this was
Mm-hmm.
this was a really good game of footy. I just think it wasn't exactly the result I think some people expected. I know after North lost to Collingwood, I think a lot of people expected this North team to never not win a game this entire season,
Mm-hmm.
and Hawthorne said, "Hold my beer." I mean, I hate saying it, but that's really kind of the way it went.
Yeah. Ooh, here we go, Donnie. Next game. It's a classic good team, bad team. Expected result. Here we go. We get the one per round is what it feels like. We get Gold Coast, and we get Brisbane, and we get the Lions mauling the hell out of the Suns in a game that wasn't close. We have Lions by 73 in this one. And this was ugly from the start. And the thing here is that, I mean, Brisbane, at the end of the day, they just have way too much talent for a team like the Suns. They just outclass in pretty much every facet of the game. And there's almost nothing that the Gold Coast, unfortunately, could do in this one. There are two teams on two clear different trajectories. One is trending upward, one's on the 5 game winning streak. The other one is completely going the opposite direction in this one. And it's not looking good for the Suns right now. I mean, a normally good defense. I wouldn't not going to be great, but they're normally a solid looking defense. A kind of an injured but a still productive ruck is what the Suns had. They did not have that at all this round. Normally, that's the only thing that's either winning the games or keeping them in games is their defense. But when you get dominated in disposals, inside 50s, marks, possessions, free kicks, that normally spells disaster, and that's exactly what happened here to no one's surprise. Ah, not a good game for Gold Coast, but fantastic showing for this Brisbane Lions team, trying to prove everyone that last season was not a fluke.
Oh, this Brisbane team just continues to get strength after strength after strength when it comes to their game, the way they're playing. Even again, Lockie Neal is missing, and they are not missing a beat.
No.
I have to give it. Coach Fagan has really got these boys going, and it is great timing for it with who they are matched up with this week. I cannot wait for that game, but we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Of course.
This was a game that has me a tiny bit roller coastered because this is a really great performance by Brisbane,
Mm-hmm.
but this was an atrocious performance by Gold Coast.
Mm-hmm.
When I was watching some of the shows, keeping an eye on it, just the point outs of so much lack of effort
Mm-hmm.
by some of these players on the Gold Coast team. Tuke Miller, their great midfielder, who I think is a great effort player, was not playing in this game, and his impact in the game showed
Yeah.
because a lot of these younger players were exposed for a lack of effort, a lack of hardness at the footy. That there was a lot of things that I think were lacking in this game, and Brisbane just ate it up. I mean, this game is a feisty, tough, hard footy game that usually is competitive, and it just wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it never really was. And the question still remain is the Gold Coast experiment for the AFL proving to be a waste of money,
Mm.
or is this just primarily you're getting a bunch of superstar talent, but there's not the effort players, the one percenters that you're going to need to kind of complete a footy team and make it into a culture and a winning culture that they need at the Gold Coast right now.
Mm-hmm. Not a good time to be one of those. Well, they were doing well for a little bit, so I think I boosted their fans up to like maybe 25, Donnie. I think they've lost some now. It's not a good time. Let's go this round with All 18 of those Gold Coast fans. Isn't that's why you guys doing this show, right? To listen to every single week of how many fans does Gold Coast have according to Ross.
Gonna
That's
have to
not
start getting a graphic going on that one.
yeah. Eh, I'll make it happen. We'll keep running tally of this to see. We'll graph it. We'll get like a little line chart or something. See how it fluctuates throughout the season. Oh man! And the next game was one. Objectively, I'm going to take off my GWS hat. And objectively, Donnie, this was an absolutely fantastic game of football. This is, if you're watching this and you're not a fan of either team, this is exactly what you want to see every single round. If we can get if we can get 9 games around of this, then this is by far, it's only going to prove that it's the greatest sport in the world, and this is perfect. This is damn near perfect football. Way better than what was it, 2017 game between these guys, and the most important game of the season. But we're not going to talk about that. But
It
the
was
only
29. It was 2019, but let's not
2019.
get too technical in the years.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I wish it was farther ago. Oh man, and what sucked is I thought the Giants really turned the page this season. They've been looking a lot better, but old habits die hard. And what did we see a lot of the time last season, Donnie? We saw leads, and we saw them get choked away in the fourth quarter by the Giants. And what did we see this game? We see a 28-point lead going into the fourth, and we see that get choked away in typical Giants fashion. And there's only a little more salt in the wound because Toby Green, he breaks his shoulder. He's out for 4 weeks. And what kind of fueled this comeback, though, was Dusty Martin. I believe, really, since he came back from his absence, his fairly short absence, I think this is his first big game since then. He kicks 4 goals in this. He's everywhere on this football field. And the thing is, it's not a complete waste of a game for the Giants because what's nice, they once again showed that they could hold their own against one of these top teams, against one of these legitimate contenders, against a possible top 4 team, almost like what they did with the Western Bulldogs. They really hold their own in that game, and they have flashes where they should win. They should have won this game. This would have been a huge statement win. Probably, shoot, it's a young team, so you might be able to get. I might be able to get away with saying this would have been one of the biggest games, most impactful wins in team history, where we are in the season. Not able to do that. Richmond's still a solid team. I guess, are they finally going to get on track? Is this finally the game that gets them to winning a bunch of games late in the season? I don't know with this team, but with the GWS, at least you gave your spiel on Sydney, so here's my spiel about the Giants. They are a good team. They can contend for the finals this year. It's getting tough, though, because that margin between the top 8 and then the bottom 10 is growing. But Donnie was kind of breaking this down too. Is that before the show? Is that the Giants realistically are the only team out of the top 8 that have a chance of making a finals push. They can still do this. It's going to be tough without Toby Green, but if they can just go 2-2 over these next 4 games without Green, that's going to be huge. And the hope isn't dead yet. This team can still contend and possibly beat the best teams in the league. It's really just a matter of putting a full 80-minute game together.
Oh, geez. Let's approach this on 2 different ways. There's the GWS side where I think you played a really, really good game against one of the better teams in the entire competition.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they're a little injured. Yes, they aren't playing as good a footy, but again, this is a GWS team that with so many big losses in so many key areas, for you to blood the youth that you are playing with and to still be this competitive against one of the best teams over the last 4 seasons. If you're a GWS fan, you have to be smiling because think about this. You've still got DeBoer, Canelio, Davis, and now Green still to come back into this lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And you've literally made a superstar out of the Green in the midfield. I mean, this GWS team legitimately can make finals. They just have to kind of survive. They kind of have to survive these next few weeks until they get DeBoer, Canelio and Davis back, and hopefully Green comes back in that time frame. Now you have the
Hmm.
bye week coming up here pretty soon, so that may really help you get some of these guys back. So if I'm GWS, this is again, I hate saying this, but it's true. This is a moral win
Hmm.
for GWS. The only thing that if I'm Coach Cameron, I'm kicking myself is you you out total shots on goal. You had 23. Okay. 23 shots to 24 for the Tigers.
Hmm.
If you put two of those behinds
Stop talking.
to two goals, you win this game. It's not the game that it was. Again, kind of like what if we're gonna say it about St. Kilda, we got to be honest here. You have 11 behinds
It's not good.
to 12 goals. Two goals go through, this is a completely different game. So this is, and then let's flip it to the Tigers. Dusty being Dusty, okay? He kicks two goals late in that second quarter, and I think that flipped the game and gave the Tigers momentum going into the second half because if
Hmm.
Dusty doesn't kick those two goals, GWS wins this game running away
Yes.
because GWS goes into the halftime with a double digit with like almost a 20-point lead. So it's a completely different game if Dusty doesn't kick those two late goals in the second quarter, which I think gave the Tigers a ton of momentum going into the halftime break, and they came out on fire. And the third quarter, they bounced it to the point where they're only down 3 points after the third quarter, and then it was back and forth for most of the fourth until Daniel Rioli gets the nice bunt. Lockie Whitfield, I felt so horrible for him because he gets the worst possible bounce. It gets over him. Rioli collects it,
Oh
kicks the
man.
goal with like 13 seconds left in the game, and then there's nothing much you can do. You try to ruck tap it, get up. Richmond ruck taps, and in just the right way, you can able to run the clock out. So
Hmm.
this was a great game. Neither team can really hang their head on the performance. It stinks to lose a game when you pretty much dominate it most of the game, and you just don't have enough to hold on late. And I think that's what really kind of killed GWS. And then I don't know if you saw this. Did you see that one
Oh,
of the few times ever the goal umpire got hurt?
that was like was it a shoulder? Did it end up being a shoulder injury?
Dislocated his shoulder. It
Oh,
popped out of his shoulder.
well, I guess if you got a dislocated shoulder, it's really hard to point. And so I understand him taking him out of the
Well,
game.
and the other crazy thing
Oh,
about it is this is the third time that this goal umpire has had an issue with getting run into or being involved in a play this season. Earlier in the year, Joe Danaher tried to use that goal umpire for a specky in a game that Brisbane played in,
that's
and
right.
he also was involved. I think he was involved in another play where he got ran into after a goal was scored. This is
This
the third
poor
time
guy.
this
What's
this
he
goal
just has a
umpire.
magnet on his back for this stuff. Oh,
Yes, and
oh,
unfortunately, the dislocated shoulder. I think he'll be out. I think he'll be out almost a month. But I thought it's just interesting that
that's
he
great.
keeps finding a way to get involved to be kind of front and center, shall we say, for some of these goal plays. But the
Dude,
best part is he got up and the Tigers fans actually gave him a standing ovation as they walked him to the change rooms
you
for the
mean
ref.
those 18,000 or so Tigers fans that was at Marvel Stadium and not the MCG is something
Oh,
that I guess a special someone took a little bit of a had a little disagreement with that one. But also, is that special someone trying to blame their lack of a their poor performance in this game on the fact that they were in a different stadium? Donnie, would you like to elaborate a little bit more on this one? Because I thought this was one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
oh, Damian Hardwick, way to open your mouth and insert your foot, sir. Okay. For I know several of the Australian fans will know this, but if when it comes to the MCG, Punt Road is literally steps away from the MCG. Most of the fans can take they've got tram stations throughout Melbourne, and you can tram through to most parts of Melbourne. I think Marvel Stadium is only something like 5 to 8 kilometers away from the MCG. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like it's a massive trip. But for some weird reason, Damian Hardwick after the game goes, well, yeah, just Richmond people don't come here. And I'm almost like, well, really? I mean, your team's playing really well. Why aren't they going to the game? And what I later found out is one of there was somebody else who was connected to the club who 3 days earlier had also kind of stated the same thing. He's like, "Well, we like our home games at the MCG." Well, a little bit of facts here for some of the people that don't know this. If it weren't for Marvel Stadium, I will say this right now, this podcast would have never happened because last year's AFL season wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Marvel, because the AFL owns Marvel Stadium and they used Marvel Stadium to get the loan to be able to pay for last year's season.
Mm.
So not only is this ignorance upon ignorance by Damian Hardwick, because if it weren't for Marvel Stadium, the stadium you're saying your fans don't want to go to, you wouldn't have gotten a flag last year, sir. Okay. You wouldn't have. The AFL might not have survived if it weren't for Marvel Stadium. And another thing, you may want to tell him to go talk to the lawyers at Richmond because the league agrees that every single Melbourne team will have at least one home game at Marvel Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So his argument is asinine at the least. Okay. Do I understand that you're going to get more fans and it's closer to your home stadium at the MCG? Yes, I completely understand that. But here's the thing, Richmond and many Victorian clubs don't want you to bring up with them. Most of the home games and road games are played in the same darn stadium. Okay. They went through it. Richmond will play 14 of their 22 games at the MCG or Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
14 out of 22. The rest are out of state because they don't play in Geelong because Geelong's not big enough. So they have to play Geelong's home game. For those that are listening to the podcast, those were
Yep.
air quotes
Yeah.
there at the MCG, which
Mm-hmm.
conveniently is what? Richmond's home ground.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, okay?
Pretty
Th-
weak.
th-
It's pretty
This
weak.
does this does get really ridiculous, okay? Hardwick, shut up, okay? I respect you as a coach. You're a great coach. Just stop talking about stuff. You have no idea what you're talking about, okay? You won. I you won. I really don't understand why there's this massive gripe.
All right.
Okay. I
It's
really just don't understand it. It just seems buffoonish to me, if I'm being bluntly honest. Okay.
there's a reason it's one of the dumbest things I've heard in a long, long time. But at least we can wash that out of our mouths with what was my match of the round, which was Western Bulldogs defeating the Port Adelaide Power in a huge statement from the Western Bulldogs, because what they were able to do, they were spending a little bit of questions recently ever since they took their first loss. So how legit they are. Looks like Port Adelaide was proving to be a really good team, and possibly they still have a chance of finishing first like they did last season. But it's taking a little bit of a hit here. What happened though is that the Western Bulldogs, they thrive on offense, and this is normally typically a really really well built and well played defense from Port Adelaide, and they weren't able to do much of anything against this Bulldogs team. And what I have to ask you, Donnie, is with this game, is this win more indicative of how good the Bulldogs are, or is this loss more indicative of maybe a questionable Port Adelaide team?
I really think this is almost, and I hate to stand the fence on this, but this really is kind of half and half.
Mm-hmm.
I think this really showed how good the Western Bulldogs midfield is, that they can go against probably one of the few teams that can match them talent for talent at most of the spots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bulldogs dominated at times in this game on the road, which is even more impressive too, because the Adelaide Oval is never easy to go to and win against Port.
No.
And I think a little bit is this is a Port team that the questions are starting to be asked because when they've faced the top 8 teams,
Mm-hmm.
they've only won once. I mean, they just got smacked down by Brisbane. They got smacked down by the West Coast Eagles, and now they've gotten smacked down by the Western Bulldogs. They've only won one top 8 game, and that was against Richmond
Yep.
earlier in the year. And Richmond's still there's still some the jury's still out on Richmond whether they're the team that we think they're going to be. So, I mean, I've heard this comment says they've started to call them flat track bullies, which a little bit what West Coast was getting called there for a bit when it came to on at home they're one team, on the road they're different.
Mm-hmm.
I also say this, there are a few injuries again. I'm injuries are an excuse. I know, coach. I know. Um, but they are missing their number one ruck. They're missing two really good young midfielders on this team that I think will make an impact. I think this poor team again. This is only 9 games into the season. I think we're really jumping the shark a little bit on just these jump to conclusions that I think are a little premature. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's still a lot of games still to be played. This Western Bulldogs team is one of the best teams in the league. I think they're going to be top four. Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs will be two of the top four. The other two were the only two that I see up for grabs
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't see Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs falling out of those top four spots. I just don't see it. It's where Port falls in the 8 is the question. I think they're still a finals team because they're going to beat the lower teams. They're not going to have this loss to a lower
Yeah.
team that some of these 8 teams have had.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really worried about that. It's can they step up and when Port plays Sydney later on in the year, when Port plays Geelong, will they get those wins? Because if they do, then the narrative changes a little bit. We'll have to see. Right now, it's not looking good for Port. There are a ton of questions. Port's lost some of these games that they really can't afford to lose. They've
Mm-hmm.
got to win these games if they want to be in that top four, get the double chance, and have a chance to win a grand final this year. Because if they're in the bottom four, it's a lot harder because you may have to win. You'll have to almost win one more game of footy to win the grand final.
Yeah. And then with the next game of the round, let's talk about. I mean, I kind of feel bad because we do have plenty of Frio Docker fans that listen to the show. Of course, we love you, and we love any other fans that anyone that listens to the show. You guys are all amazing people listening to the best footy show in the world. So, congrats to you on that one. But I kind of felt bad because we were fairly hot on this Dockers team a handful of rounds ago, and it feels really recent that they were even in your top 5 power rankings, Johnny. But things have kind of fallen apart, unfortunately, for them over the last number of rounds as they fall to Essendon this week. And it's once again, it's been the common theme is inaccurate goal kicking. Once again, the downfall for this Fremantle team. They kick 8 goals and 13 behinds. That is never that good. Oh man, it was kind of tough to watch. Especially I was kind of rooting for Fremantle, even though I've been trying to say that Essendon is an underrated team, and maybe you get another win here. Maybe that helps my case a little bit. But one of the really damning stats for Fremantle is that they rank 6th in the league in shots on goal, kicks on goal. But they are dead last in kicking accuracy as they're kicking at just about a 40% clip. And their main guy, Nat 5, he's the lead culprit this season. 2 goals for the man, 16 behinds. This is not how you win football games.
As much talent as this Frio team has in the midfield, and just the injuries have just really taken a big bite out of this team that was so solid defensively, and they've still played really good defensively, but
Mm-hmm.
their goal kicking has just been atrocious. The fact that I think this is their ninth game of the season, and I think there's only been one game or maybe even zero that they've actually kicked more goals than behinds, which is not a good trend. It's such a hard thing to win a game of footy when you're kicking more behinds than goals because you're losing opportunities to put more points and put more scoreboard pressure on the other team that you were playing. And this was an Essendon Bombers team that's young, it's inexperienced. You've got a ton of experience in David Mundy and Nat Fife, and you thought they would be able to kind of have a field day
Mm-hmm.
against this youthful Essendon team, and they just they used that, the spring in their step, the youth, the athleticism, and Frio just really couldn't stay with it. And then, as we said, the inaccurate goal kicking really kept Essendon in the game, and Essendon holds on for a 7 point win in a game that really sends Frio into this game against Sydney this week with not a ton of confidence in a run home and a run going into this bye week. It isn't much better after you play Sydney. Oh, here's your next gift. You get Port at
Mm-hmm.
Port.
Oh man.
So your next two games, I mean, this was your game to get yourself kind of back on track before a couple of difficult games. And unfortunately, this loss really hurts this Frio team. And they go into this Sydney game, they're down on momentum. They've lost so many games, they've lost several games in a row now. So this is just not looking very good for this Dockers team. I mean, they've lost 3 games in a row now.
Mm-hmm.
Just the momentum is just not there for the Dockers team.
That's that's for sure. What team that still has all the momentum in the world is the Melbourne Demons as they take on Carlton, and they move to 9-0 on the season. They remain undefeated, and they're able to win by a really solid margin here. Where a game that really wasn't close at any point in time. They win by 26, and that this is another team that got a little bit of the bug of the inaccurate kicking. They go 13-16, but they still win by a good margin. That just goes to show you how damn good this Demons team is. And they're still looking unstoppable. They're still looking really good. They looked really. They looked bad this game in terms of how the D's have played. Comparative to how the D's have played this year, they looked bad. They looked underwhelming. But at the same time, they just keep rolling. And this is really scary that even when they're bad, they're still really good.
This is the D's team that you can tell there's so much confidence in the on the D's side right now. They're just playing such good footy, and I completely agree with you. This was far from their best performance. This was a game that, if you really look at the score, yes, they win by 26, but it probably should have been closer to 40.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they've played in previous games before. Again, a little bit of wet weather footy that does lower the score a little bit, and the fact that they kick 16 goals 13 goals, 16 behinds. Again, another one. You
Yeah,
kick
I know
more
94
behinds.
is a low scoring game for these D's.
Yeah, but the funny thing about it is this is a team that defensively, best defense in the entire competition, and it's not even close at this
Mm-hmm.
present point right now. They are just so solid defensively. Yes, they lose a player to a knee injury, but they replace with a youthful player. May and Lever are absolutely outstanding. Christian Salem, their halfback, who's just a distribution machine right now, is really going. Their midfield is absolutely just running like a well-oiled machine. Petraka, Oliver, Langdon out wide. And then their forward line, they're being able to chop and change on the run and still be able to make it work. Ben Brown comes in, Bailey Fritsch still kicks some goals. Again, not a ton of goals by a ton of different people, but it's spread out. So it makes it that much harder to defend. Tommy McDonald with another good game. So this is a D's team that, honestly, I see them going 10. I see them winning this week, going 10-0, and going into that Western Bulldogs game, literally being their first super test of a season. And if they can get by the Western Bulldogs and go 11-0, now you start getting people talking, can this team go undefeated through the entire year?
Mm-hmm. And right now, I don't see anyone beating this team is a scary thing. It's no team is going to be able to beat the D's. The only team that can beat this Melbourne team is Melbourne. And the last game of the round was, of course, West Coast wins, and where else would it be? To be fair, they have one win on the road. But of course, this was going to be at Optus. They take on Adelaide, and they defeat Adelaide. And this was a fairly close game. This was actually a really close game until the second quarter, about halfway through the second quarter, and then things just kind of take off for the Eagles, and they run away with this game. They take it by 30, and they're still undefeated at home. And a really great thing here, leading the way, yeah, Jack Darling. He puts up 3 goals in 3 minutes. This guy goes insane in just a span of 90 or of 180 seconds. 3 straight goals for the man, and that really aids this Eagles team in taking this game. And West Coast seems to be making a pretty solid turnaround this season. I mean, remember, I believe it was through like around 6 or 7 or so. They were win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. But now they've been able to win 3 games in a row, wins over Fremantle, Hawthorn, and Adelaide. I know, not the best of teams in the world at this point in time, but 3 wins in a row is 3 wins in a row, and they're really building some momentum this season for the first time. And so this is really promising if you're the organization and if you're a fan of this team.
Yep, and this is a West Coast team that they're getting healthier
Mm-hmm.
slowly. And the scary part about it is they've got two of their better midfielders over the next probably 3 weeks. They will be returning. McGovern comes back in this game. He doesn't have to play Tex Walker since Adelaide sat Tex Walker, which I'm still trying to figure out why they did that. I mean, I understand you
You
want
mean
to
you're only
rest.
going to sit the guy that's actually winning you football games? Huh.
Well, you rest him in a game that probably is the most important game to have him out there because you're facing the two-headed monster that is Darling and Allen. And even though Kennedy is not playing in this game, that you've still got an absolute monster forward line to try to defend. Oh no,
No, no.
Kennedy did play in this, so you did have the three-headed monster of Allen, Darling, and Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you have no offense on one side, and you trust your young forward Shane McAdam, a smaller, undersized forward line, to kind of help lead your line.
Of course.
It's a recipe, unfortunately, for disaster. And this Crows team now has lost 5 in a row. Oh boy, I'm the early season success is such a distant memory, unfortunately, and it's not getting much better. Here's your present after the West Coast Eagles. You get to face the Melbourne Demons.
Oh, so bad. Yeah.
Wow, just wow. So that's I don't know. This was a West Coast team, and the crazy part about it is you said Darling kicked 3 goals in 60 seconds. He kicked 5 goals the entire second quarter. He kicked 5 goals in the second quarter.
Mhm.
I mean, I think if I remember correctly, I think he might have beat Adelaide himself just in that quarter. That was really one of the reasons why the West Coast Eagles won this game as a whole. So just I don't know. This I agree with you. The teams that the Eagles have beaten are not exactly the world beaters, but you get positive momentum into a team that's slowly getting healthy and again
Mhm.
has such an advantage out at Optus Stadium. You were literally waking up a giant in the West Coast Eagles, and I don't know if the competition wants to wake up this team.
Yeah, and this Eagles team is starting to look like the team that a lot of the people thought they would be, myself included, preseason. A team that is really going to be contending for a flag. It's still unlikely at this point, but if they can keep this up, then they're going to get themselves right back into that conversation. But there we go. That's our coverage for round 9 of the AFL season. And Donnie, it's time for your team of the round. So take it away, my friend.
Oh man, this was definitely a week that was a lot of fun because you're gonna hear some names that you have not heard this season. There's a lot of new additions into my team of the round. And one thing, let's see if many people catch this. I told Ross this before the game. There's one team that has a player in each section of the ground, defender, ruck, forward and midfield. So let's see if anybody catches this as I'm saying this. So let's hop right into it. Let's go to defenders. Hopping in, the Irishman from Geelong, Zach Tui, 31 disposals, 5 intercept possessions, 5 score involvements, 6 marks, and 593 meters gained, and probably the best torp I have seen kicked in a game in a long time with his 68.5-meter bomb that landed just past half midfield at Marvel Stadium and then probably bounced another 15 meters onto that. So altogether, you're probably talking close to an 80-meter kick altogether
Mm-hmm.
for the Irishman there. Let's hop up. We'll go to Brisbane for our next defender. That is Grant Birchall, who former Hawthorn player, 26 disposals, 5 intercept possessions, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, 13 marks and 436 meters gained for the aging defender from the Brisbane Lions. Next, another name we've heard several times for the last couple of weeks, and that's North's Aaron Hall, the disposal machine. 28 disposals, 4 intercept possessions, 6 score involvements, 6 marks, and 605 meters gained for the young halfback from the Roos. We jump to Essendon. Nick Hind, 31 disposals, 6 intercept possessions, 2 score involvements, 8 marks, 523 meters gained
Mm.
for there. And then for some weird reason, as I was preparing my notes, I definitely missed a player's stats. So let me quickly gather that. That is Alex Witherden of the West Coast Eagles. I can quickly grab his stats here because I did have it. He had 30 disposals altogether. He had 9 intercept possessions, 5 score involvements, and 684 meters gained for Mr. Alex Witherden of the West Coast Eagles. And the last defender, such a consistent player here, Mr. Caleb Daniel, 26 disposals, 8 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 7 score involvements, 5 marks, and 449 meters gained
Mm.
for the defender from the Western Bulldogs. Let's go to the big man. That is the Ruck. And North's Todd Goldstein gets my nod this week with 19 disposals, a goal, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, and 28 hitouts for the Ruck from the Roos. We hop into the midfield. A constant, it seems like Mr. Clayton Oliver, 28 disposals, a goal, 2 behinds, 4 intercept possessions, 2 goal assists, 10 score involvements, and 355 meters gained for Mr. Oliver there. Mr. Consistent for the Cats, Mr. Cameron Guthrie, 36 disposals, a goal assist, 6 score involvements, and 7 tackles for the hard running midfielder from the Cats. I'll give him. So I got give him. I know this is going to sting a little bit here, Ross. Mr. Dusty Martin from Richmond Tigers, 28
It's okay. I
4
expected it.
goals, 2 behinds, 4 intercept possessions, 9 score involvements, 5 clearances, and 428 meters gained by the superstar that is Mr. Martin. Essendon's Darcy Parish hops into my midfield with 39 disposals, a goal, 5 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 9 score involvements, 10 clearances, and 459 meters gained for Mr. Parish. And last in the midfield, Mr. Dane Zarko from the Brisbane Lions, 34 disposals, a goal, 2 behinds, 4 intercept possessions, 2 goal assists, 14 score involvements, 9 marks, and 708 meters gained for the tough midfielder from the Brisbane Lions. We'll hop to the forwards, my favorite here. We'll start off from the Brisbane Lions. We also have Daniel McStay, 14 disposals, 4 goals, 7 score involvements, and 8 marks for the forward from the Lions. GWS makes a connection here with Mr. Jesse Hogan, 16 disposals, 4 goals, a behind, and 7 score involvements for him there.
It's good
North
stuff.
throws in another player with Mr. Cameron Zerha, 9 disposals, but 4 goals, 2 behinds, and 7 score involvements for Melbourne. Frio, I finally have a player hopping on from the Fremantle
uh,
Ducks. I knew it would happen
it's been too
eventually.
long.
Let's give a tip of the hat to Mr. Matt Taverner. 16 disposals, 4 goals, 3 behinds, 9 score involvements, 7 marks, and 320 meters gained for Mr. Taverner. The Western Bulldogs, Aaron Naughton, 11 disposals, 4 goals, 4 score assists, and 5 marks for the high flying forward. And last but not least, in my starters, we just discussed him. West Coast Jack Darling, 15 disposals, 5 goals, 2 behinds, 8 score involvements, 8 marks, and surprisingly, a very high 684 meters gained
Jeez.
for the big forward. We'll hop on to the bench. We'll go through each part of the field. My defender, We'll give Hawthorne a little bit of love here. Mr. Blake Hardwick, 28 disposals, 8 intercept possessions, 4 score involvements, 7 marks, 5 tackles, and 327 meters gained from the ruck. I did it again. Frio's Sean Darcy. I got to give him love. He had a really, really good game. 22 disposals for the Big Rockman, 2 intercept possessions, 3 score involvements, 4 marks, 38 hitouts, and 233 meters gained by the lumbering Rockman from the Frio Dockers. Midfield, North Jai Simpkin. 38 disposals, 5 score involvements, if my lips could get out of the way, 13 clearances, 550 meters gained, and 9 tackles for the North midfielder. And the final is the forward. You mentioned him a little bit earlier, jumping Isaac Heaney from the Sydney Swans, 22 disposals, 3 goals, 2 behinds, 9 score involvements, and 6 marks for the high flying forward from the Swans. And that, sir, will end my team of the week. And yes, I did. If you caught it, North Melbourne has a member of each of the sections of the field for the defender, a midfielder, a forward, and a rock.
That is so good, especially on the best round that they're going to probably have all season long. But Donnie, let's roll on into our power rankings then, because we had some good stuff this round. I was happy. For me, I was really close with you. I mean, our top four is identical, but it came down to that fifth team. And that's where we have our differences. But of course, the same thing has been for the last 5, 6 rounds at this point. 1 and 2 is Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs, respectively. Then after that, we have the Brisbane Lions. Don, you had them at 3 last week. I still had them at 4, with Geelong ahead of them, but now they flipped. Geelong, I mean, they win, but it's a lackluster win, and Brisbane's won 5 straight, so you can no longer deny that. But where the argument lies from either one of us is who that fifth team is. And of course, you could have already seen these power rankings if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter at Fourth Along Radio, Instagram at Fourth Along Radio, because we release this every Tuesday evening in the States and Wednesday time, whatever the hell, in Australia. I don't have the separate time zones because I don't know enough of that. It's morning to afternoonish in Australia. You guys can make do with that one, right? So go ahead and check those out and drop a follow if you haven't already. But Donnie, who did you have at number 5?
I had the West Coast Eagles. I know we'd already kind of discussed it. 3 wins over some lackluster teams, but I think West Coast is getting some guys back. They're starting to play some better footy. Again, another good win over that. I can't argue the fact that they're one of the few teams that have 3 wins in a row after probably the first 4 teams in it. I like the Swans. I think the Swans are starting to play better, but it's the fact that they have that loss a few weeks ago that are kind of holding me back
Are you talking about the
from
Gold Coast
wanting.
loss?
Yeah, the Gold Coast lost in the fact that last week, yes, they lost to a Demons team that's really, really good, but when you try to go off form and they're 2-1, they're 2-3 in their last 5,
Mm-hmm.
and are only 2-1 in their last 3. So I can't, I hesitate a little bit to put, though they are sixth on the ladder. I'm a little bit hesitant to hop them into my top 5, but another big win this week, and maybe we'll see kind of how West Coast goes. But right now, this is the top 4 kind of solidified themselves as that 5th spot that's always kind of up for grabs.
Yeah, it is. And almost for the reasons, as you said, it's not the Swans. I will put them in my top 5 this week. It's because if we want to, it's what it comes down to is that the fifth spot comes down to Sydney or West Coast. Not, in my opinion, Port Adelaide, because I don't like putting a team in the top 5, especially a French team like Port Adelaide was at 4. They lose a good game against the Western Bulldogs. They drop to like my 6th spot, with a 6th or 7th spot here. They're still 5th on the ladder. There's nothing wrong with where they are. But for me, this was between the 6th and 7th team on the ladder, Sydney and West Coast respectively. And when we look at West Coast, we look at the last three games. There are three wins, but like you just said, like we said, they're against the some of the lower teams on the ladder. And if we look at Sydney's last three games, they have won two of three, and their only loss was against the top team in the league, and one of their wins was against the only team ahead of them or one of the only teams ahead of them on the power rankings. They beat Geelong in a really good game. I mean, that game was so fantastic. I love how we're still talking about that. So, in my opinion, 2-1 against these three teams is better than 3-0 against West Coast is three teams, but at this point we're almost splitting hairs with this one. This is almost just a matter of opinion and a school of thought of how you want to look at this. But you could easily make the argument for either team. Then hell, you could make the argument that Port Adelaide still deserves to be in number 5. But that's why I would love to hear what you guys have. Hit us up on the socials, like I said, in the YouTube comments, or leave a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. But Donnie, it feels like constant theme. I mean, the Swans fan has been weary on the Swans this season, but that's why you got a guy like me that's not afraid to fan the flames a little bit for them. And if you're too worried of putting them in the top 5, I'll do it for you, so it's okay.
Well, again, I've stated it many times. It's one
You
of the
have.
reasons why what I didn't do anything until round 5 is I'm a form guy. I think the form really does kind of say how things are going. And like I said, if you look at their last 5, the Sydney Swans are 2-3. Most of the other teams in the top 8 are better than 2-3. So it's really hard for
Mhm.
me to say, yeah, I'm going to stick you in my top 5 when 3 of your last 5 games you come out losses, and the Gold Coast loss is just it's a bad loss,
Mhm.
shall we say. And unfortunately, at the time, it wasn't as bad because Gold Coast was actually starting to kind of play better. They were getting a little bit of momentum.
That's a good Gold
I
Coast
think
team.
I
I
think
want to say that.
eventually, like I said, the next 4 games for the Swans really could change their kind of outlook when it comes to it, and it's going to change their form outlook because they go 4-0. They go 4-0 in their next 4 games.
Mhm.
That makes them 5-0 in their last 5 games, which is going to really kind of be interesting, especially considering you have Melbourne versus the Western Bulldogs in that time frame, and then as soon as Sydney finishes this 4 game stretch, then they've got Port Adelaide after the bye. So there's a lot of fluctuation. Again, it's still very very early. It's not like I'm saying Sydney doesn't have a chance at all. I think this Sydney team is going to build. There's still a lot of youth that needs to grow up a little bit. There's going
Mhm.
to be some growing pains. There's going to be a bounce in the road. And again, I'm going to say it now, and I say this with respect. I don't believe the Demons go 22-0. I think they slip up at least once
Yeah.
just because it's so difficult to go 22-0. The last team that got this far would be St. Kilda in 2009, and they went 19-2 or 20-2 and lost in the grand final to the one team that beat them twice.
Mhm.
So you just never know. Like I said, we don't know how the matchup will be against the Western Bulldogs, who have that great midfield,
Yep.
but we don't know how Melbourne will do against the Western Bulldogs, Naughton and Bruce. So we just don't know. So I don't want to jump that gun. Like I said, I want Melbourne to be undefeated going into that Western Bulldogs game because I think that's going to be just an absolute dandy of a game.
And now let's cap things off with our round 10 tips. I had a better week in round 9. I think both of us did because the one before that, at least for me, was not very good. But we get a hot start to that. Possibly get another really good Friday match. So this hopefully kicks things back into gear. The hot streak of Friday games that we've been having. We get a rematch of the 2020 qualifying round game between the Brisbane Lions and the Richmond Tigers. Richmond, uh, kind of different spot in this one than where they were last year. And I see the Lions gain their revenge in this one.
I'm completely with you. I think the game is at the GABA, which
Yeah.
Richmond doesn't always travel as well. Um, I think this three-headed monster runs into this game having an absolute field day with a shot to get after it because who does Dylan Grimes take? Does he take Charlie Cameron? Well, Charlie Cameron's going to beat him for speed.
Mm-hmm.
And if he takes Hipwood or if he takes Danaher, then he's going to get pulled up the field and he's not going to be able to do his intercept marks. So there's a lot of bad matchups for the defense. Yeah, you've got Broad. Yeah, you've got Vlosten. Richmond's got some good intercept markers, but this is a little bit of a different test. I really want to see Oscar McInerney and Big Nan Curvis going at each other because this is going to be a rock battle that's going to be quite interesting because I think who dominates, if one team starts dominating the ruck, the midfield battle will flip because of it.
Hmm.
If Zorko and Lions and the midfield of the Lions get going, they're going to be hard to stop because Richmond doesn't have that depth after Dusty. Yes, Liam Baker came in and played really, really well, but he's thoroughly undersized. And Hugh Luggage and Zorko are big midfielders. They have a lot of size. It's not
Hmm.
going to be as easy as when they play GWS, who after Tom Green don't have a ton of size in the midfield. Cal Ward's not exactly the biggest individual in the world. So, and then I'm interested to see how does Harris Andrews and that defense for the Brisbane Lions handle Lynch and Rewald.
Hmm.
They have the experience of beating them last year in the GABA. I think they have a lot of momentum coming into this game. I think Richmond going to the GABA is never easy because the Tiger Army, for some odd reason, they can't travel 6 kilometers. Why would they travel up to Brisbane? We will see. I'm gonna go Brisbane on this. I just think Brisbane's mojo, the way they're going, is a lot better than the Lions, than the Tigers right now. But this is going to be an absolute classic. I think this is a
It's gonna be a
great
close
Friday.
game.
Oh yes, this is
It's
going
going.
to be
Ooh,
an
imagine,
absolute
Donnie.
slugfest.
Get a little after the siren action on this. Wouldn't that just be too sweet? The next game of the run is going to be Carlton and the Hawthorn Hawks, and there's Hawthorn Hawks. I mean, they just lost to the Roos, and they're probably going to lose to the Blues, and the Blues for Hawthorn is going to continue.
Carlton loves to get out and play offense. I don't know if Hawthorne's defense is going to be able to stop. Now, the biggest question I have is Harry Mackay healthy? Because he
Mm-hmm.
started having shoulder issues in that game against Melbourne. I think that really hurt Carlton's attack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Eddie Betts should have still a fun game in this one. I think Carlton's just got a little too much. Hawthorne is absolutely reeling right now. This is an absolute gift for Hawthorne for Carlton right now facing Hawthorne, a perfect chance to get themselves back on the winning track. I will go with the Blues on this one.
And the next game is going to be the biggest discrepancy in terms of betting odds. The Geelong Cats nearly, or the Gold Coast coming in nearly an 8-1 underdog in this one if you're one for betting. And yeah, Geelong is better than the Suns. The Suns are reeling at this point, and there's no. Well, I guess there's one alternate reality where I might be tipping the Suns, but that is not this one. I'm going with the Cats all day on this one, and they should be able to win by 30 or so.
Cats at home with GMHBA. They just GMHBA Stadium. Too much talent, too much ability on the Cats side. I will go with Cats as well.
That was a super cut and dry one. One where it's almost surprising this is a bigger betting discrepancy than Adelaide and the D's, and this is another game for me where I'm gonna take the Demons. Not close.
Oh, this I agree with this one. It's Adelaide is reeling. Hopefully, they get Tex Walker back, which I think will help a little bit when it comes to the forward take. But
They might not get beat
it,
by as much then.
unfortunately, I agree. I think this D's team, they're just absolutely in fuego. I want them to be undefeated going up against the Dogs in round 11. So I will tip the D's on this one, even though it is the Adelaide Oval. So I think this one could be interesting for the
Mm-hmm.
D's. The travel aspect is something they haven't had to deal with a lot this season.
Here we go. Next game, super easy. We got the Western Bulldogs. We got the St. Kilda Saints. And I'm taking the Western Bulldogs. I like these last 3 rounds. If I'm feeling really confident with them. If one of these go wrong, then obviously something's going real bad.
Yeah, this is another one where you just have one of the strongest midfields facing a team that I don't know. Patty Ryder's influence has really changed the St. Kilda team. I'm really
Has it
intrigued
changed
to
it enough?
see more than you think. I mean, I think a few of these games flip if Patty Ryder's not playing for
Mm.
St. Kilda. The question I have is, does Tim English come back for the Western Bulldogs, or do they stay with Jordan Sweet in the Rock, considering it's gonna be a little bit of a bigger test this particular round. I'm gonna have the Duggies in this one, but it will not shock me if St. Kilda stays in this because St. Kilda's got some talent. It's
Mhm.
the goal kicking that would frighten me from tipping St. Kilda at this present point.
Now the next game is going to be a lot closer, at least odds wise, compared to the last three that we've just ran through. We have the Frio Dockers, we had the Sydney Swans at Optus. And if you're looking at the odds right now, it's $1.94 for Frio and $1.90 for the Sydney Swans. So that at least odds discrepancy is closed tremendously compared to the last few games. I don't understand why they might think this is as close. Frio is on a clear decline at this point. They can't kick straight. I mean, Sydney, they've had their accuracy problems recently as well. Of course, you can't overlook that. But it has been nearly as bad as what Frio's been going through. I'm going Sydney on this one. It might be a close game, might be a 2 to 3 goal game, but I'm confident with the Swans.
Oh, this is one where the place where the game is being played, I think, is affecting what you're looking at when it comes to the betting odds. Is
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it's at Optus Stadium. I
Mm-hmm.
think really does affect this because,
Mm.
as we stated, the Perth teams play better in Optus. They just do. It's fact. The way this season has gone is that when the Dockers or the Eagles are at home, they play better. The Swans should be better than this Frio team. I think the fact that Buddy Franklin should play in this game should worry a lot of Dockers fans because they really don't have that big defender to
Buddy
defend
Freeman,
him.
that's a
Hayden
bad man.
Hayden McLean's playing better. Isaac Heaney's there, so that's a three-headed. That's a little bit of a three-headed monster
Mm-hmm.
for the Frio defenders that I would be a little bit scared of. The interesting thing will be is the midfield battle: Sarong, Fife, Mundy versus Warner, Parker, and Kennedy. It's going to be a fun matchup because it's very similar. You've got some youth talent that hop into the midfield with a couple of old, experienced, really good players. Kennedy, Parker versus Mundy and Fife. This
Mm-hmm.
is going to be a fun midfield to watch. I think whoever dominates this will prove to be the winner in this. The inaccuracy of Frio is one of the other reasons why I think Sydney has been just solid enough kicking goals that I think
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be able to get over this. This is close. I think this is under 2 goals. Docker Man and my Frio fans that follow me, I cannot wait to chat with you guys in this game. I think this is going to be a close game. This does worry me a tiny bit because the track out there is hard, and I'd be very interested to see how the Swans handle this long road trip, especially with some of the youth players that they have. But I think this is a really good game. I think the Swans just barely edge this,
Mm-hmm.
but I think this is under 2 goals. I think this is a really close game just because Frio is so tough at home.
And now we go into another game that's going to be pretty damn close, if my guess means anything. We have the GWS Giants and the West Coast Eagles at Giants Stadium. So this is going to help my tip because might be the homer in me, but West Coast, you do have that win. You do have that win on the road, but it is just one, and you are the 3 game winning streak, but it is just against those poor teams. The GWS Giants, this is going to be a huge game for them to see how they respond without Toby Green, without the guy that's been leading them since round 1 of the year. If they can come out hot, they could beat this West Coast team. I think this game is decided in the first quarter. I'll go with the Giants on this one, Donnie. I'll go with the Giants.
Now, I
Uh,
will be blunt. I will be very, very honest with you,
like you are
and
always.
well, a little bit of behind the scenes to our people is that I'm very notorious for if I see something that I think Ross really needs to see, I will tweet at him to be sure that he sees it.
Yep.
And I tweeted at him the fact when we found out the news that Toby Green was going to be out with his shoulder injury. I'll be very honest with you. Toby Green is not hurt. I tipped the Giants in this game.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the Giants lose Toby Green, I think is a killer
Mm-hmm.
because that's been their leader the last several weeks when they've played really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's never easy to replace a guy like that. The Eagles are playing much better. Yes, this is a road trip. And again, we get the voodoo, we get the Jekyll and Hyde Eagles team. We don't know. Again, I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm gonna tip the Eagles only because that injury to Toby Green, I think, will affect the Giants in a negative way. I agree with you. I think this is a really, really close game. I think this one comes down to it late. I just think the goal kicking ability of Darling, Allen, Kennedy, and the West Coast Eagles, I think will
Hmm.
just so many talls for GWS to handle. I don't know if they've got the defensive ability to do that. But this is going to be a really good game. The midfield battle is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
And let's move into an easier game to tip, I would say. Collingwood, Port Adelaide. I'm taking Port Adelaide 100 times out of 100 against this very specific Collingwood team.
Oh, this is one of those. I'm going to tip Port, but I've seen several things on social media and even things is that does Collingwood get a little get a little cheeky, shall we say, in Australian
Mm-hmm.
terminology, and do they pull the Port Adelaide never tear us apart at the MCG as a get
Oh,
back
man.
at Collingwood after wearing the prison bars after the game? I don't know if Collingwood is going to pull that trigger. I'd be fascinated if they do because I think it may work as in the opposite way than it's intended.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a bad idea if they do it because they're going to make a Port Adelaide team that has kind of been kicked and kicked
You
vigorously
need to anger
after
this
that
team.
loss to the exactly, and
You
that's what I'm kind
don't
of
need to
thinking.
poke
It's
the
like
giant, Donnie.
I think that would be the worst thing to do is send Collingwood, a team that is not playing really well, up against a Port team that is angry. Not such a good idea. I think Port wins this, and I think Port wins this big if they make that mistake.
About to murder Collingwood. Oh, I really hope it happens. That'd be so funny. Of course, pretty much, unless you're a Collingwood fan, you would love to see Port Adelaide put on, win this game by 60 if they can, or more. The last game of the round
Possible.
is going to be Essendon and North Melbourne, and how much I want to say, yeah, let it ride, Donnie. North Melbourne gets back-to-back wins on the season. I like this Essendon team way too much, and I don't like this North Melbourne team enough. That's why I'm going to take the Dons on this one.
I'm with you in there. If this would have been Collingwood, if this would have been Gold Coast, I would have been all over picking North. But this Essendon team has so much talent. They've got a lot of good positive momentum. I'm gonna go with the Dons here. I think the Dons just have a little too much talent in certain areas that I think North is still lacking a little bit. So I will go with the Essendon Bombers.
And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap it for us on our round 9 coverage of the AFL season. Let us know anything that you might have thoughts on in the comments or on the socials, because I don't even need to tell you guys to do that because you're very good on doing that on your own, and I absolutely love it. But Donnie, before we wrap, your thoughts of round 10 in one word or phrase.
Oh, whew, this is gonna be a fun one. Teasing,
Ooh. Ooh.
because there's some teasingly good matchups in this round, even though it may not look like it. That you've
Uh-huh.
got North Melbourne versus Essendon, I think is going to be a great game. The first game of the entire round is Brisbane versus Richmond. I mean, this that could be so much fun to watch. You've got so many intriguing matchups. You've got Carlton facing Hawthorn, which I think could be a very, 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 very interesting match, especially if Carlton somehow finds a way to lose to Hawthorn. You're going to have all the Vic media going absolutely nuts. You've got Melbourne with that chance to knock off Adelaide and get to 10-0, setting up that matchup with the Western Bulldogs. The West Coast GWS game is going to be a fun little tease because our West Coast back, or does GWS, even without Toby Green, show that West Coast is still a home road, completely different team? So
Mm-hmm.
this is a teasing little round here before very, very intriguing one next week.
And I've said at the end of every single show, but man, I am excited for this round to kick off, Donnie. But, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoy round 10. Hope you enjoyed round 9. And I hope you're tipping. And any of you that play fantasy football, I hope you have a great week in that. And, ladies and gentlemen, we will catch you after round 10 of the AFL season.